We know that the most famous Targaryen prophecy from A Song of Ice and Fire is the one known as the Prince That Was Promised, which foretells a hero born of the bloodline of Aegon I, who will ride a dragon to defeat the darkness and usher in an age of ice and fire. In the series, this prophecy is ultimately fulfilled by Jon Snow, Aegon Targaryen, who defeats the Night King with the help of Rhaegal and then brings summer back to the Seven Kingdoms after the long night. But there are many other prophecies that may have been just as important in shaping the events of A Song of Ice and Fire. In fact, the world of George R.R. Martin, no prophecy is ever truly complete without some ambiguity. And even in the show, there were other prophecies that were mentioned but never fully explored. So in honor of House of the Dragon, here are 3 untold prophecies from A Song of Ice and Fire that could have changed everything. The Architect's Unwritten Script. Let us start with the first untold prophecy from A Song of Ice and Fire that I want to discuss today. And that would be the following quote: "The end is known. The Architect has written it. All his words are written, but as yet he has not spoken them all." This prophecy originates from a dream that Daenerys has early in A Clash of Kings, which is then later discussed between her and her advisor, Illyrio Mopatis. And while this prophecy is interesting on the surface, it takes on a whole new meaning when you realize that the Architect almost certainly refers to the Architect of the Citadel itself, which means that this prophecy was likely written down somewhere in Old Town, maybe in a book or a scroll or something else. And since this prophecy was literally found by Daenerys, that means that someone in the Citadel probably uncovered this text, realized what it meant, and then sent it to her as a warning. So the question is, who was this mysterious Citadel Architect? And what exactly does the prophecy mean? Well, let's take a look at a few possible answers for the first question. Well, the original architect of the Citadel was Otto Hightower, the Hand of the King under Aegon I. However, that would make absolutely no sense because he died in 1 AC. Yet this prophecy was found by Daenerys in 300 AC, so he couldn't have been the architect. And honestly, none of the other architects really seem like they would be wise enough to write down such a cryptic prophecy either. Instead, I think it's much more likely that this quote was actually written by the maesters themselves. You see, every time a maester mentors a new apprentice, they pass on their knowledge and memories to that student and become one with the Citadel itself. So in a way, every maester is a kind of architect, building upon the knowledge of those who came before them. And that's why I think the maesters were actually the architect in this prophecy. But what about the prophecy itself? Well, the easiest answer would be that it's simply referring to the overall path of destiny laid out before Daenerys. After all, she does go on to fulfill many different prophecies, including that of the prince that was promised, and eventually does become the mother of dragons. However, I think this prophecy was referring to something far more specific than that. In fact, I believe this prophecy was referring to the destruction of Harrenhal during the Dance of the Dragons. See, this war was essentially ignited by a secret that Otto Hightower was hiding. Namely, that Rhaenyra wasn't truly Aegon's heir, because he was his daughter, not his son. And this revelation came to light because of a single letter that Otto sent to Lord Jason Lannister, breaking the vows of his order and betraying the secrets of the Citadel in the process. Ultimately, this act would lead to the entire destruction of Harrenhal, killing many innocent people, including the young Queen Helaena Targaryen. Now, it's possible that this prophecy was written down by a maester who witnessed this destruction firsthand, especially if they were against the war. And if that's true, it would also explain why Daenerys didn't know about it. Because this maester never sent the prophecy to her, not wanting to interfere with her destiny. But what's even more interesting about this is that this prophecy was written in the past tense, meaning that it was likely written down immediately after the destruction of Harrenhal, which means that whoever wrote it must have somehow known that Harrenhal would be destroyed and the young queen would die. And that's why I think this prophecy was known by someone very important at the time, someone like the High Tower himself, Because if anyone would benefit from the destruction of Harrenhal and the death of Lena, it would be him. Shadows of what could be. Next, let us take a look at a second lost prophecy from A Song of Ice and Fire that could have changed everything, and that would be the following quote. "If you seek to find me, look where the sun first touches the sea." This prophecy is a bit more straightforward than the last one, and it's spoken by a mysterious witch in Braavos that Daenerys meets while seeking to reclaim her stolen dragons. She tells Daenerys this after correctly identifying the names of her dragons and saying that they had once belonged to a princess born of the blood of the dragon whose head was as strong as Valyrian steel. The witch then went on to tell Daenerys that she was looking for a princess who needed her help, but that she would only be useful if Daenerys sought her out, willingly stating that should she force the princess to come to her, then she would die before the sun set. Ultimately, this prophecy led Daenerys to a small village where she found the princess she was looking for, Princess Arianne Martell of Dorne. And while this story seems pretty insignificant on the surface, there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. See, while Daenerys did interact with Arianne, she ultimately decided to ignore this prophecy and did not help her, which led to her downfall at the hands of Euron Greyjoy. But what if she had listened to this prophecy and helped Princess Arianne instead? Well, for starters, this would have forged a powerful alliance between Dorne and the Targaryens, creating an unstoppable fighting force that could have easily defeated Euron. Not only that, this prophecy was clearly meant to guide Daenerys to Arianne, who was also a potential love interest for Quentyn, her youngest son, and possibly a future queen consort. In fact, if Daenerys and Quentyn had married Arianne, it's entirely possible that this prophecy would have ended up coming true anyway, because Daenerys was also a princess born of the blood of the dragon. So it's entirely possible that this was a self-fulfilling prophecy in disguise. In fact, this could have been the beginning of a whole new era for Dorne and the Targaryens. Maybe Dorne would become a naval powerhouse under Arianne's rule, finally controlling the entire continent of Essos and even parts of Westeros. Or maybe Quentyn and Arianne would go on to unite their kingdoms through marriage and put an end to the independent rule of Dorne forever. Either way, this prophecy was a sign that the two houses should join together, but Daenerys ultimately chose to ignore it. The fates entwined. Finally, let us take a look at a third lost prophecy that could have changed everything, and that would be the following quote. "Fire will find blood. Blood will bring forth new life. Blood will sacrifice new life. Under this new life, fire shall burn and bring forth summer." This prophecy was given to Aemon, one of Belon's sons, by one of his sisters, and was obviously referring to the upcoming Dance of the Dragons, which would see Baelon, his sons, and most of his loyal followers, the Blacks, die horrible and slow deaths. On the other hand, it would also usher in a new era of peace and prosperity under the rule of Aegon II, his daughters, the Greens, and the surviving Blacks who switched sides. But what if this prophecy had been taken literally? Well, let's break down each line and see what it could mean. First, we have the line, "Fire will find blood," which is obviously a reference to the dragon cannibal, since it's the only dragon that both breathes fire and also kills family members. Then we have the line, "Blood will bring forth new life," which could be a reference to Rhaenys, and Corlys Valerian's son, who is conceived shortly before Rhaenys' death aboard the Sunfish. Next, we have "Blood will sacrifice new life," which could be a reference to the death of Helaena and Maegor, Aegon II's children who die alongside her during the battle for Harrenhal. And finally, we have "Under this new life, fire shall burn and bring forth summer," which could refer to the eventual victory of Aegon II and his return to King's Landing, bringing an end to the years of bloodshed and ushering in a new age of prosperity. So what if someone had taken this prophecy literally and tried to avert the disaster that it foretold? Well, for starters, someone could have warned Corlys about Caraxes and advised him to keep his distance or even kill the dragon before it grew too powerful. And while that may sound simple enough, it would have ripple effects throughout the entire story. For example, if Corlys survived the battle, it's possible that he would have lived long enough to advise his son on how to rule properly, averting the civil war altogether. Not only that, but someone could have also protected Helaena and Maegor from certain death, though doing so would have almost certainly cost them their lives. But if someone did manage to protect the children, it's entirely possible that Aegon II would have lost any desire to fight, realizing that there was no way he could win. Which means that the Dance of the Dragons may have been completely avoided. And if that's true, it means that this prophecy could have prevented the near extinction of dragons, the destruction of Harrenhal, the death of so many powerful lords and ladies, and the weakening of House Targaryen, all by simply being believed and acted upon. Echoes through time. When you really stop and think about it, it's incredible how many prophecies there are in A Song of Ice and Fire. From the prince that was promised to Nice's dream, there are a lot of prophecies in this world. And even though many of them do come true, they usually have a few ambiguities that leave room for interpretation. And I think this is done intentionally by George R.R. Martin to remind us that fate isn't always set in stone. While some prophecies do come true, others can be averted and characters have free will. That's why I believe that the reason prophecies fail sometimes is because they are unmeant to be taken literally. Instead, they serve as warnings, hints, or even suggestions to the characters and readers. And I believe that this was the case for the 3 prophecies that we discussed today. Someone probably knew about the prophecy regarding the architect, which is why they kept it a secret until Harrenhal was already destroyed. And maybe they wanted to punish the Targaryens for their actions. Someone else probably knew about the prophecy involving Arianne and Quentyn, which is why they ignored the obvious signs. And someone else knew about the prophecy regarding the Dance of the Dragons, which is why they allowed it to happen. But what I really want to know is this: if these prophecies were real, what else could we be missing about the history of Westeros and its future? And if you want to find out what the most insane theories currently out there are, then be sure to click right here to watch this next video.